என்னது கிழமைடா திங்கக்கிழமை சொல்றேன். நாளை காலையில கிளம்புனா திங்க
Good afternoon, participants. I hope I am audible to everyone. I request one of the participants to confirm for me whether I am audible.
Yes, audible, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So today there are two main concepts. One is server-side rendering, and other one is testing. In testing, we are going to see how to use jest and how to use enzyme, both of these. Now let us come to our first topic, that is server-side rendering. So when we come to server-side rendering, we have to first understand what is client-side rendering and as well as server-side rendering. So in order to make this concept very clear, I would like to take one example in our day-to-day life. Now let me suppose that I have some food center and in which I prepare a number of food varieties and I have to serve my customers. So in that scenario, and I have a request from my customer that he needs some, let us suppose some idli or something like that. So there are two ways to serve this order. The first way is I can send him the batter and he has to prepare the idli from his side. And the other way is I can send him directly the idli which he has ordered. That is, the food is being prepared and sent. So these are the two different things. So what happens when you go for client side rendering is you are passing the batter, like you are not actually giving the entire DOM to your customer, whoever is posted the request. And the second scenario, you can see you're serving the entire food. There's no need to prepare anything and there is no need to include anything. He has to just, he is able to just eat it. So that is the case. So these are the two things which you have to keep in the mind. And the other important thing, why we need server-side rendering. So now we understood the difference between client-side rendering and server-side rendering. The first importance is whenever you go for client-side rendering, you understand that everything which is being handled is being handled in the end. And when you come to server-side rendering, so what happens is entire DOM is being prepared, binded, and it is also included all of its assets, including the libraries which has been included, either JS or the style sheets which has been included, that's your CSS. All these things of a page have been completely rendered, and there is no work on the other side of the request. Wherever the request has been processed upon, that is, the response has been sent upon. So there, in that part, you don't have any work. All the work has been done by the server itself. So once you understand this clearly, now we can get into the actual concept of how we are going to deal with the server-side rendering. Okay. So now we understood that whatever we are going to do at the server end. So in order to process this, we have few server programming languages like Node.js, ReactJS, and Redux and Redis. Now for today, the example which we are going to take is from Node.js. We are going to use the library Express.js. So, and we are going to achieve our server-side rendering. The concept is clear that whatever the pages have been evolved until now are like traditional pages, and they have multiple traditional ways to render the page. Now, once if you enter into your single page application, the concept is clear that you're going to create your virtual DOM and you're going to render your same entire page. And whenever there is an updation, we will never bind the JS file again. There is no need to bind the CSS file again. Everything in a page has been automatically binded. And we will see the difference also. I will show you the difference also, how it is being happening. You can see in the static website, this is the scenario. Like suppose if you are exploring some information, either your profile information or something. So the every day-to-day process will take some time, and there are n number of things to tile upon. So at that time, what is the way to achieve it? First, you have to understand, like we have to realize that whatever application we are putting on the internet browser has to serve the customers, each and every customers. So when each and every customer has to be served, there is some way to load the entire page first, and then the search engine has to understand what the page is all about, and then it has to be dynamic also. So these are the things you have to achieve. And in order to do that, first we were relying on JavaScript, and now we do rely on whatever the single page application is, and then we used to rely on Redux, and then thereafter we realized that we need server side rendering. This entire thing has to happen at the server side also. So this is the diagram which will actually explain you what's exactly happening in the server side rendering. Before getting into the explanation of this, I would like to show you 2-3 examples. So let me shift. Just give me 1 minute. Again, the main concept in the client-side rendering and server-side rendering is JSX itself, and thereafter the Redux, including the Flux architecture. So these are the concepts which will make us always come into the exact point which we are looking for. So any normal React application, you can say it will render into your client side only. Suppose we are creating a React application. By default, its rendering is in the client side itself. This your app.js working is in the client side itself. So let me share the example. This is a normal application of a ReactJS. So in this, you all can understand that initially the application enters into your index.js file, because we have written our react.dom.render, and it will ask for it, and it will fetch your root element, and once it fetches the ID as root, it will enter into your app.js. So that's the reason why whatever is being called here appears first, and then it will check with all other components. As you can see here, I am highlighting all other components like header or nav or content sidebar, whatever you have been importing is also rendered with the help of this export default. So wherever you are using them, you can be able to see them. So that's the normal way we are actually working with any React application. So if you observe, let me show you in the inspect. if you observe, the entire code you can see is inside your app itself. This is your app React component. You can understand the entire rendering happens from the app itself because of react.render. This is what we have seen in the basics. So this part is clear. Let me go to the other example where I can explain you how server-side rendering would work. All right. Now this is the example where we are implementing server-side rendering, and here if you observe in your inspect, you can find the actual ID root being implemented here instead of React component which you have seen in the last example. So these are the two differences, and this great difference will help you to work upon what are the needs of a basic HTML page. So that part we will see in the PPT. Like I will explain you why you exactly need server-side rendering, and once you implement server-side rendering, in what way these web applications are becoming more useful to the customers, and how the request being passed has been served as fast as possible. Okay. Fine. Let us start. This is the actual architecture. So as I told you earlier, for today's example, we are going to implement Node server, and in that we are going to use Express.js in order to achieve server-side rendering. So whenever there is an request, so usually you can tell a data request or making a request for your web page, whichever you want. It approaches the Node server, and then it makes an API call to get the data, which we have been writing to our request, and then it will return the data as requested. And this again depends on your scripting side language like Node.js, how it processes the requested data. But the entire data is being gathered at this point. And then once it publishes the data into your app, that is into your app, and then renders the final HTML. So you have to observe here that at this Node server point, only the final HTML is being fetched, and that is produced to the user. So whatever all has happened between this Node server and your API server, the actual binding of the data of your web page. Let us say web page or web application. In that application, we are going to render that first page or whatever it is. The entire HTML has been rendered. So what this actually means is, let us suppose I have an e-commerce website. Let me show you in the paint. It will be very easy to understand. Sorry. Alright. So this is what exactly happens. You have n number of web pages or components, let us say, and each one has its own binding. All right. Each one has its own binding of its JS or CSS or other components to be included And apart from that, it will have its CDNA, other packages, whatever it is. So the same will follow in all of these pages. Now, once in a while, this entire web application has to load in your browser. This has to come into your browser. So for the first time, when this application loads into your browser, it has to connect to all of this JSCs or whatever packages or whatever installations you have been given upon. And it has to update your CDN also. So once this is done, for all of these pages, not only the first page, all the pages or all the components of your entire web application, finally, it will release your DOM, yes, to your browser, and that will appear as an entire HTML page. That is finally your user interface. Yes. So this is what actually is happening. Now, let me show you in an example so that it will be even more clearer. Okay. So now in this page, if you can observe that what are all the bindings are there, it happens here. So you have your meta tags, and then you have your link tags, which include all the CSS or JSON or whatever you are including. Apart from that, you have your scripts included here, and even in the bottom, you may find few of the scripts to be added. So for the first time, all these has to be loaded. Yes, this is of course when you do server-side rendering. The other scenario is very different. And what happens finally is this entire content you are able to see as a single HTML. And what are all these settings are there here, along with your browser URL in the sense, the URL which you are able to see when you open your website. So this browser URL, all right. For the first time, when the user is loading this application, for the first time, this will take, you can say, a very large time to load. Yes, but of course it is negligible. And once it has been opened, when the user tries to open it for the second time, he will be having the history of the URL. So all the pages which have been loaded here, each one will have its own URL, as we have seen in the React route, how we are directing and assigning each path to all these pages. So each of this URL which we have processed in our program is stored in your cache with the help of history URL, and then this way this HTML is preserved for the further users. Okay. And we have also seen how virtual DOM will be helping you to calculate any changes in the data to be binded in any of the components. All right. So this is the actual way to achieve a web application which is very fast. As I told you, there are disadvantages also in the server-side rendering. It will take too long time to render, and all of the assets has to be very included in the very first page, and this entire thing has to be converted into a single page, render the entire HTML only from the node server. This is all will have some complexity, but still this is ignorable when considered to the problems arising in the client side rendering. So that's why we always prefer server side rendering. Now let us enter into the PPT which we have stopped in the. Let me go to the architecture. So this is what, this part is what actually we are interested into. how it publishes this entire into the final HTML. And always you will be returning this HTML only with whatever molecule type of changes you have or atom type of changes you have with the help of your virtual DOM. So this way, our rendering becomes very faster and there won't be any flaws. So if you calculate what exactly happens, as I already explained in the previous slide itself, the first thing is you make a request for a web page, any web page, it enters to the server and the server has to process it. In order to process it, it will go collect all the data with the help of API or get post request, whatever we have written, and then it will return the data as requested. And finally, the work happens in your server itself. So this is the important part. And then it will return the HTML generated. So each time, for the next time when this happens, for the next time when the request gets posted, the same won't occur again and again. It will directly push the data into the app and render the final HTML. And let us suppose if there is any binding request only, this will flow, and that too in between you will have your virtual DOM to work on. So this is the scenario where you are rendering your page, and suppose there is no cache, what happens? And suppose there is cache, what happens? So that is what now we are going to see. So in the first scenario, what happens is for an API response, you have 500 milliseconds, and for server-side rendering, you have 150 milliseconds, and for your node server, you have 10 milliseconds. And there will be some band latency due to the page being more overloaded with images or more number of components or in any cases. So let us assume that as 150. So there is totally of 18 milliseconds. Now if you cache, what happens? So now there is a cache memory which will store all the history of your APIs and as well as your binding of JS and as well as bindings of your CSS. So and at that time, how you get calculated? The scenario is same. Each time the process is same. The response time from your API is totally different. How this happens? Because this entire data you have been loading at once and storing in your virtual DOM. So there is no need to bind. And suppose if even if you are binding also, as we have seen, whichever atom has to be updated, only that part gets updated. So you can cut this entire time. So now it takes only 160 milliseconds, and this helps you to render the pages as fast as possible. So you can see this step is being deducted. So now you have only this step to undergo for the very next execution of your request. So it will make a request for the web page. It will fetch all the HTML page from the node server directly itself, and it will return the requested HTML generated. Now, in order to achieve this, you have to write your code, that is server-side rendering, using your Node.js, and in that we are going to implement Express.js. So now the caching of the whole page will take even more lesser. When it is for the second time, it will be just 20 milliseconds. Only in the first time it will be 60 milliseconds, and once it is stored, it will be only 20 milliseconds. So then when data update happens, you have to assign yourself your constants to request the query, and as well as from the cache, you have to provide what is to be updated. Yes. And don't worry about these constants, how you have to declare and all. Each library will provide you with its own syntax. So we have to just follow the syntax, and nothing else has to be entered into them. Now, if you see this example is from Redis, so don't worry about the syntax. Now, let us say we are combining all these server-side rendering, single page application, and cache. at that time we are able to achieve the first load as fast as possible, as we have seen 160 milliseconds only. And then coming to SEO, how SEO is being helped when once you go into server-side rendering, you have your history of APIs, like example, the page which we have seen, let us suppose something like this, and then you have your subroutes also are present. Let us say example one, program one. Okay. So this slash will help you to achieve these semantic needs of a search engine. Like a meaningful word can help the search engine to fetch the particular page as fast as possible. So wherever there are applications which have to go through search engine optimization and which has to approach the customers and clients and make benefits through the web application, has to follow this. So that's the way your server-side rendering will be helpful. This is also with the help of cache, because it has the history of all the URLs which you are using. So this way it will help. And of course dynamic, because whatever the changes are happening are instant and you are able to see them entirely within 20 milliseconds. So this is the highlights. You can create universal apps, single page application, and like PUA. These are one of the current trends, and apart from that you have progressive web apps also. So this is all about server-side rendering. So if any doubts, please ask me. I hope everyone understood what exactly happens in a normal React application, that is client-side rendering. And when you include your Express.js and write your server-side rendering, as we have seen the flow of steps, when you write in the same manner, how you are going to achieve your server-side rendering. These 2 points are the things which we have to get here today. And participants, if you have any doubt in understanding them, please let me know. You can post me your doubts. If you have any doubts, you can post them on the chat also. Meanwhile, I'll be helping you and the installation. Okay. So let us summarize it in a short. In order to summarize, we can just check with our architecture itself. So there were few things which have been achieved with the help of JavaScript. Now, when we have achieved single page application, we understood the importance of server-side rendering. Like you can see how the client-side rendering, server-side rendering, as a simple example I told you, if the batter has been passed to the customer to make his own idlis, that is your client-side rendering, and then you can understand if the entire idli has been prepared and passed to your customer, that is your server-side rendering. So you can correlate this with your web application. When I say you have client-side rendering, all the hedges which has to happen with the entire page binding, like a page has to bind to its own JS what has been written, its own CSS what has to be written, and its CDNA and other parts have to be done. So this entire thing happens usually in the client side, which is being hectic because each time it has to update all these for each request. Yes, so because it is happening at the end of the slide. So in order to overcome this only, we have come with this server-side rendering along with our single page application. Previously, we have our single page application, that is our React application. Now, in order to achieve this, there is one static HTML only being produced. To an end user, it is a static HTML being produced. But all the process which has to happen has been happening at your server side itself. So now, in order to do that, what happens is actually you can observe here, when I combine these two, my first load will increase. For the very first time, when I load my application, it will slow down because at the first time it has to bind everything in an application, even before a request has been processed. So that will take some time when you open the site for the first time. This is the one thing. So in order to understand that we have our architecture, what exactly is happening, you make a request and what are the data get binds, it returns the data. And now the node server process your entire app into your static HTML page, and that is being finally written to the user. So this is what exactly happens. And if you calculate the steps also, it is the same. And when you calculate your responses in your milliseconds, you can understand that all these has to be covered. So it will obviously increase the time. So in order to overcome that, we have introduced the concepts of cache also. So once the cache concept has come, there what happens is you keep the history of everything. And once you want to open your page, it won't take each time to all these type of rendering method. It will directly go to your cache, take the history and bind the data to your UI and then just pass it. And of course, it will check if there is any changes in your atoms or molecules, which I mean in your virtual DOM. Yes. So this part of response time from the API now reduces and it saves most of the time. And now when you go for the second request, that is once you want to open your website for the second time, what happens is the step 2 and step 3 has been deducted. So finally, in the entire step 5, we have only making a request, goes to the server, directly fetch the page, and then returns the HTML. There are now only 3 steps. So this will save your even more time. And this you can achieve only with the help of server-side rendering, a single page applications, and as well as cache. And the benefits of this are the first load, like you won't face any problem in the first load also. And you are able to achieve your search engine optimization also because of the way you represent your URL. And this is dynamic too. The data which is being binded once is being set, and if there is any changes, it automatically updates it with the help of the virtual. So this is the overview. All right. So now let us take one example. I'm sorry, I was not audible. So what we are going to do is first we have our dot package already installed. So from that we are going to use the server.js, which is your express file, and in this whatever functionalities are there, we can use them. And how to use this express, now today we are going to see. You can observe the what are all the props or the what are all the components have been already defined functions, and this is an ASIC only, that also you can see. And then now let us move into our actual part, that is your where you are writing your code. So now if you observe here, you are returning your entire page here along with your routes. You can combine them also. And here you can find your nav, which has been done like we have done yesterday. Okay. So for home, there is no initialization of the page. You can directly make it as a default page. For other pages, we have defined these names. And yesterday we have been seeing how to achieve when there is no page available, and this is the way you can achieve when there is no page available. So, let me put here so that everyone can implement and check it out. And when you write your route, this is the thing you have to do. And there is other simplest way also. You need not define any component for your path. In that way also you can achieve. But the actual way is to provide this asterisk to your path and set there an element, there is no match, and define its component, or you can create a component and directly assign that also. In either of the way, like whichever way you find, you go with state component or stateless, whatever. Then if you come to the actual part lies here, where we are trying to return our entire DOM server. And in order to do that, you can take all these imports from your React DOM itself. What are all the server utilities have to be taken. So this also you can achieve from your React DOM itself. Now, the other thing which we are interested in is how to write your server-side rendering exactly. Now, the server-side rendering, the flow will actually follow the Flex architecture, that is the unidirectional data being binded. So just give me 1 minute. Let's share the other example. All right. If you observe, we have taken our Express and we have also taken our React DOM server. Both of them have been included here. All right. Now, the very first thing you have to do is you have to check whether you're able to listen to your server or not. You can take another port because already you have been running your local host in one port. So this thing you have to keep in mind, and you have to write your app.listen over here. Yeah, it is the same way as we use arrow function to write. And the next thing which we have to do is you have to get the request and response. For that, you have to write your app.get, and you have to set the string from whichever the initial app has to start. For that, you can make use of your React server itself. So these are the two important steps or the codes which we have to follow. Suppose this port is not available, you can change it here, and whichever port you allocate, from there it will start listening to the server, that is your node server via your Express.js. So this is the one of the important part, and the first part we have to achieve. And yes, I will try to build this again. Let's check if I have to listen to the server. It's not able to connect. Let me check. Let us check in the console whether it is listening to the port or not. So you can see actually the status code is 200, okay, but due to some network bandwidth issues, we are unable to check it actually. So once you write your entire server-side rendering, here you can find your cache, and you have your request headers, and as well as your requested URL you can pass, and this all happens with the help of your get method. And once you get the response, until now we didn't write any response, so we are unable to see a response field. But once you write a response, you will be able to see all those data in the response headers. So this is the general way you check what's exactly happening. But actually it should print here. That's totally fine. Now, what I would request you all is please create a new app, React app, and then in that you can write this entire code into your index.js, because that is the first initialization of your application. You go into your index.js, and once you make it this part clear, the next thing we can do is start writing our server-side rendering. Now to achieve that, we have few steps and we have to follow few syntaxes. So I'm just posting this. You all can try this and check your console, because this is the manner you check what exactly is happening. Check your console for the output, and it should print you listening on the port, whatever port number you are giving. You can directly send the variable also, but this is the constant which you are directly assigning to it, so it's better to write your constant. You can even achieve it through your Express.js, assigning a variable, but this is the usual way, and it is the flexible way also. And for now only we have seen how you're going to connect your app to your Node.js. Further, we have steps to write for server-side rendering. There are totally 5 steps to achieve that, and that part we will continue in the next session. And till now, if you have any doubts in this code, understanding what's exactly happening, how to connect this, get this variable and all, please let me know. You can go through your React DOM server directly, because while installation we have also installed React DOM also. So that's the reason. So participants, can we end the session or you have anything else to ask? Because those 5 steps I can't complete within a few minutes, so that's why I'm taking you to the next session. Okay, and thank you everyone. Thank you so much. Please do try these 2 things. One is the empty page which you send through your React router, and the other one is your listening to your server or not. These are the 2 things which you have to try. And thank you so much.
Thank you for attending the participants. We'll meet you for the next session.